Okay, hold on a
What's
second.
going on, everybody? Welcome to the Get the Bag podcast. I'm your host, Gladia Castro. Got my co host, Tim Park.
Hey fam, what's going on?
What's going on? This is a really exciting topic. We're at episode 40. We're approaching that 50 mark, which is kind of crazy how quickly it's gone. And I'm also joining live. So whoever wants to tap in, can join in. Trying to start, for people that maybe can't catch us on YouTube. We know you're on Instagram, so feel free to, tap in with us. This topic is going to be really key. I think a lot of, especially in the wholesaling world, a lot of people, um, are finding a hard time when it comes to offers or, just making yourself stand out when it comes to throwing out offers. And so we're going to talk about how you can really utilize creative finance when it comes to um, your offers standing out, getting people involved. So we're going to unfold that a little bit more today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So is it something because I know it's even in the commercial world, creative finance is very often utilized, but people don't really talk about it like that. They just think like, over $1 million, $50 million deals. Like you don't really consider that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's pretty common from what I understand.
Yeah, it's very common in the commercial real estate realm, I guess. And I've seen it, and a lot of brokers maybe approach you to say this is a deal where the seller is willing to finance um, the actual building or multifamily or whatever the case may be. It's definitely, I think, actually the creative financing came from the commercial because, commercial is so kind of relaxed and some of the regulations on how do you do a commercial deal that
Hmm.
it kind of spilled over into residential and, off market deals where you have a little bit more flexibility instead of an on market deal.
Hmm.
And I think, providing this solution to some of these sellers that are off market and need to sell their house depending on their situation, it might work for them because they want maybe a mailbox money coming in on a monthly basis and then getting a payout later on the full price that they're looking for. So, and
Right.
there's different creative ways to do that or terms, as we'll talk about today.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been around for a long time, from what I understand. And I learn something new every day. So it's not something where, we want to say uh, we're exact experts at it, but we've gotten really good at understanding the knowledge and what's needed. And even for me, like I'm always trying to perfect my craft. So I'm like, how can I relay it better to sellers in my conversations with them? And so just kind of asking the people who are using seller finance or subject to any creative finance strategy, I'm asking them questions like, hey, how are you pitching it? How are you formatting your or framing your conversations? But before we kind of dig into that, we'll kind of go over the various strategies that are used in creative finance and what each one of those means, and then also mention how you can use, I guess, how you can form or frame it to sellers, like what's kind of a conversation piece. And of course, we'd love to answer any questions that you have related to it, because guys, I'm sure there's plenty of opportunities out there.
Mhm.
When you just have one option of a cash offer, you're just not working with much. You got to give the seller options. And it varies on their situation as well. But yes, tap in with us, like us on YouTube, subscribe. We're on here every Wednesdays. But to start off with, the most common one that's like really kind of been the hot topic is seller finance. And what is seller finance? Seller finance is if the owner owns a property free and clear, that means there's no mortgage, nothing on the property itself. So what makes this really flexible and really easy to understand, because people get that confused with subject to, but seller finance, if they own it free and clear, and this is why it's so important when you're going through your questions with the seller. is
Mhm.
understanding. One of the questions is like, hey, do you own the property free and clear? Um, and that initial call should really be gathering as much information. It's really rare where you're giving somebody an offer on that first conversation. You want to kind of do a follow up and hand off, especially if you have a team member, but just so you can kind of analyze it on your own and understand it. Because there's a lot of things to consider when it comes to seller finance. And that's an easy jump to ownership as well. Like any one of us can buy a house on seller finance. Um, from what I understand, you need in the agreement, you have your terms of what you agree. You're
Mhm.
creating a note with the title company that they're setting up, and they're just saying, "Hey, Gladia will pay Tim every month based off of these terms," and then it's just the deed that's passed over from Tim to me.
Right.
So it's very straightforward. And if you have a very and we talked about this, I think last week, you have to have a really strong title company that understands that's done seller finance. So as you're kind of going through asking um, title companies, you need to be like, hey, have you done seller finance deals before? And I'll
Mhm.
also ask around. But this is such a great tool and strategy because again, um, you don't need to qualify for a loan. You don't have to, uh, you know, have a history, a work history. It's just between you and the seller.
Right.
Now, there's a lot of fine tunes in it that people don't really talk about, like the entry costs. Like if you do move forward and want to purchase the property, seller finance, sometimes the seller wants some money down. You want to
Mhm.
get it the least down as possible, but you have to consider too, if you're moving forward with it, you have to buy the property. So there's closing costs sometimes. Is if the property needs to be fixed up, you got to also allocate those costs. So it's never like a zero entry cost to seller finance. You have to pay something. So this is where some people sometimes get a private lender to help with
Mhm.
like the down payment, the cost, like maybe 20,000 down to give to the seller, cover the closing costs, cover fixing up the property. But it's still a pretty low entry compared to having to put down a down payment in and of itself, like 5% or however much is
Right.
needed, and then qualifying for a loan. Um, but that's like if you want to buy it. Like there's a whole other side if you want to wholesale it. Um,
Exactly.
so have you, Tim, have you kind of I know you haven't really worked out a residential deal doing seller finance, but you want to share kind of in terms of wholesaling, like what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. I think the cool thing about seller financing is it's, versatile. So basically you can take it down yourself or you can wholesale the deal. So you can package the deal, do the terms and everything, and then flip that seller financing agreement to another, buyer, cash buyer, or investor as well that looks for deals like that because it just gives them a chance to maybe get somebody in there that didn't qualify for a loan or didn't, but has a stable job and they feel confident that they can make the mortgage payment. So, those are some of the easiest ways to do that. I know, like in uh, like people like Pace Morby has courses on how to, flip, seller financing, even sub two, what we'll talk about later as well.
Mhm.
But it is definitely a situation where you don't have to do seller financing and then take it down yourself. You can make money by flipping it to another investor as well
Right.
too. So that's what I kind of love. That's why I love real estate, just because there's these different scenarios that help the seller out.
Mhm.
And, it's not just a cash buy. It is, it can be, seller financing sub two or, things that are coming new to our space that we're continuing to learn, right?
Right, exactly. So it's a what's really great and really straightforward, and this took me forever. Like, how do I what do I do if I want to wholesale it? Because if you're just starting out, you probably want to close. more wholesale deals to like collect capital. And then as you start getting more deals, you can use that to like buy properties. So
Right.
you get anything is assignable. So if you have your contract that
Mhm.
says it's assignable, you can assign anything to anybody. So the way it works is as long as it's assignable, you can assign the agreement with this seller for owner finance, seller finance, and you get paid as the wholesaler on the down payment.
Right.
Um, so let's just say, hey, the seller wants 5,000 down, and you can even finance that down payment, which is like, or the buyer can. So
Mhm.
that's where it's like you kind of cut down your entry costs. But if you're a wholesaler, you want to get paid on a seller finance, it's all on the down payment. So say if the seller wants 5,000 down
Mhm.
and my fee is 10,000, then that means the buyer has to come in with 15,000 down.
Right. Right.
So in the assignment agreement that you have with the seller, it'll say, when you break down the cost, it'll just say $10,000 to assignee, I believe, and that's kind of, and then the title company takes care of the rest. So it's really really straightforward. Um, and it's really easy to explain. It just takes practice in terms of framing a seller finance. Because once you know, okay, the owner doesn't owns it free and clear, there's no mortgage, I know what to pitch next. So the first initial call should not be, you shouldn't be giving an offer really, unless the seller is like super just really motivated to sell.
Right.
But
Right.
you really kind of want to break down. It's like, okay, typically, we always come in as a cash offer first, and we like to share options. Are you open to this? And then the next conversation can be, you still want to throw out a cash offer because you just
Mhm.
never know. But the cash offer is always going to be lower than what your seller finance, because with seller finance you can actually offer a bit more if it makes sense. Obviously you want to make sure you have like, okay, what's the expenses for fixing up the property? Are there tenants in there? What's the
Mhm.
rent? And you want to like, kind of break down the numbers. So that does take time to understand. And that's where we recommend watching Pace Morby's videos. He has a ton of content out on how to break that down, or reach out to one of his group members, reach out to us. Because once
Mhm.
you understand it, you're adding another tool to your arsenal. So instead of just being like, hey, this is a cash offer, I can only do
Right.
$100,000. That's
Right.
it.
What one question I think we get a lot too on this seller financing is, what contract do you use for seller financing? Like, do you use the regular purchase agreement? And the answer is yes, because you use that purchase agreement, but you add in the terms that you
Mhm.
had agreed with the seller onto the purchase agreement. So
Right.
I think that's, important aspect of, kind of setting that up with the purchase agreement. And a lot of people said, ask if it's a separate agreement with
Mhm.
the seller financing. So,
Yeah, really, really good point. And because everybody, for the most part, if you've been doing wholesaling, you have a purchase agreement that you've been working on. You would just add additional terms, either at the
hmm
bottom, or some people add it at the top. That just breaks down. Okay, so say, hey, the $100,000 cash offer doesn't work. You're like, no. Tim's like, hell no, get out of my face. And I'm
hmm
like, well, hey, listen, you did mention you owned it free and clear. Would you be
right.
open to receiving a little bit more if you got some of it now and got some of it later? There's different ways you can frame it. I think Pace is like, hey, if you can give me the price you want, would you give me the terms you want? Like, it's kind of his bar. But however
hmm
you feel comfortable saying it, you're basically saying, hey, I may be able to offer you more if you're interested. And so that's where it's like you have another option. And that's where you stand out, because you kind of can pitch that to the seller. So the seller may be like, well, I really wanted that 120. You can be like, hey, I can
Right.
I can get you that 120 as a cash offer. It's just I mean, the $100,000 unfortunately is the best we can do because of X, Y, and Z. But hey, if you're not in a rush to sell, because there's going to be different situations. That's why it's important to listen to these conversations with the seller, because you'll understand how motivated they really are. If they're not
hmm
strapped for cash, or sometimes they want to avoid capital gains tax, meaning if they sell the property cash, they're going to receive a nice little tax bill at the end of the, come April, for what they sold it as. So if you do it seller finance, they're being taxed much less for what they're receiving. So
Right.
sometimes that's also a good thing that you want to look out for, where you're like, well, Tim, you said that you want to avoid capital gains tax. And this is the best strategy I've found with other sellers. Is that something you're open to discussing? And just kind of leave it open ended for the seller to listen
Mhm.
and understand. And sometimes if they're more savvy sellers, they'll understand. They'll be like, yeah, yeah, I've done it before, or like, yes, I've heard of it. Yeah, what terms are we talking? And so
Mhm.
that's where you can have the conversations of like, well, what do you need? Sometimes they may be like 50,000 down or something like that. And on a regular residential deal, it probably doesn't make sense. That's where you're like, okay, well, is that
Right.
how much you need? That's where you kind of the negotiation starts, where you try to
Right.
like work out like you typically don't want to mention the interest rates or down payment. You just want to see like, what do you need?
Exactly.
And they may just be like, just get me that 120 and I'm okay with that. And so then you can
Right.
work with that, check the numbers, and then you can be like, cool, well, if they say nothing down, then you can maybe offer the cash buyer, be like, hey, give me 15,000 down. And that's
Mhm.
usually pretty feasible for a cash buyer. It just depends. So it's really straightforward once you understand that. Now shifting to subject two, it's a little bit different because there, oh, you got my little cat there. You're talking about the when subject to is you actually have the owner who has a mortgage on the property.
Right.
Um, Now this is a little bit more complicated, and one that we're all still kind of learning. I wouldn't say again we're experts. That's where like Pace Morby has a ton of
Mhm.
content when it comes to that, but subject to is only, but it's very similar to seller finance in a way, but there's more
Yeah.
paperwork involved, and there are definitely
Exactly.
more risks involved. This is where you really want to have either a really good transaction coordinator or somebody who like is an expert in that, or a really strong real estate attorney or title company that understands that. So subject to is when the owner has a mortgage on their property. Um, and it could be that they're upside down on it, and that's where you maybe get into short sale. But for the
Mhm.
simplicity's sake, we'll just say, hey, they owe $50,000 on the property. They don't necessarily, they want to get out of it. They're done dealing with the property. They don't really need cash up front, or maybe they like everybody's been offering them you know, $30,000 for the
Right.
property, but they
Right.
want, they're like, I need 70. I need to get something for it. So this is where it's like, hey, we can come in and give you that price, but we'll take over your mortgage for you. And so, if it's $70,000, you come at the purchase price and the mortgage is 50, there's $20,000 that you can finance, or, if it's a low amount, you can maybe pay it off cash, but if there is some gap there, you can finance that $20,000. So you're like, hey, we'll take over your mortgage, and that $20,000 will finance and
Right.
pay you every month. And usually that's enough. But again,
Mhm.
we're oversimplifying a little bit because it is quite complicated. There are risks involved and so it's important to understand that and have those
Yeah.
conversations with the sellers, and like, hey, there's the due on sale clause, which is like, hey, the mortgage company being like, hey, you need to pay this mortgage off now.
Right. Right.
Or whatever the other risks involved. So it's really important that you're packed with that. So my recommendation is to learn one thing at a time. Like, obviously you want to focus on wholesaling first, understanding that, but once you grasp that, move to seller finance, get a grasp of that, and then move to subject to.
Mhm.
But it's just learning little bits at a time. I think for a lot of us, we try to juggle everything at once, try to learn wholesaling and then seller finance and then subject to at the same time.
Right.
I think whatever it is, if you want to start with seller finance first, like, go for it. But I think wholesaling in general is like the groundwork, the
Absolutely.
foundation
The
of everything.
foundation. Yeah. I totally agree, and just to backtrack, the main difference between seller finance is that people think they could do a sub two when, it's free and clear, or vice versa. They want to do seller
Yeah, they get the
financing.
two
Yeah,
confused
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. So I just want to kind of make sure that was clear.
Right. Yeah, and it's all I mean, we can probably go on. There's various types of exit strategies when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
creative finance. There's like lease options where, you agree with the you agree with the tenant to, it's like a rent to buy kind of situation. And that's where you start wrapping, and that's where it gets more advanced, where it's like you own the property as like seller finance, right? And you can wrap that in to somebody else. So if like I had agreement with the seller to seller finance, I got it from them, and I have tenants in there, or maybe it's vacant. I
Mm-hmm.
can wrap that to that same and create terms with another retail buyer, possibly, who maybe couldn't qualify for a loan because they jumped jobs or whatever. I can
Mm-hmm.
wrap that to somebody else, and ask for a larger down payment,
Right.
and higher rents, or monthly payments. So that's where, and then you're not responsible for the property. You're just collecting the money from the retail buyers, and then you're paying the seller. So that's a more advanced, but also kind of part of the creative finance. Another one that's being talked about too is novation agreement, which is again a
Yep.
little bit more complicated. So we're not going to like dive deep into like what
Yeah.
that looks like. But that's usually where you like, either partner up with the seller, and then you can, like, there's various things you can do. You can partner up with the seller, fix up the property, and then put it on the market. Or
Mm-hmm.
if the property doesn't need too much, you work with the seller on a price, and then you list it. Do what do they call it? A flat fee listing, meaning
Mm-hmm.
you put it, like, somebody puts it on the MLS for you,
Right.
for a flat fee. And then as long as the numbers make sense and you have enough gap, you collect the rest. So there's a
Right.
lot to learn about. And I know it can be really overwhelming for people starting out in wholesaling or just getting involved in real estate. But like I said, start with one like strategy and work yourself up. And like I said, we're still learning a lot. But by watching other people do it, or like, reading up on reading, or books or
Mm-hmm.
videos, we become more comfortable. And now it's like I feel more comfortable offering it. But I'm always just trying to improve and seeing how I can have that. But maybe we can talk about how we can frame the conversations, whether it be seller finance or subject to, like how we kind of want to transition those conversations with the seller, so that again we're giving them options. Because
Mm-hmm.
with any like how we work, we like options. When you're only giving me one option, I can easily knock that down.
Right.
Like,
Right.
if I'm like, hey Tim, we can only, based off of our conversation and what we're seeing on the market, we'd have to meet you at like $1,000.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to frame it in a way that makes sense. And, I think the way we were taught is that we tried to get a number from them on what is comfortable.
Hmm.
It's not going to be a rental basically number. It's going to be something they're comfortable getting a check in the mail
Hmm.
but it has to make sense with our numbers that we're putting together as well. But and that's all about the negotiation part, and then framing it the right way, because um, they might not understand what you're trying to do. So you have to frame it
Right.
in a way to where, hey, this is a situation where, you know, you're behind on your, let's say, your mortgage. It's a mortgage situation, right? We can be able to help you if, the cash offer is not um, an option for you. Then
Hmm.
what we can do is, we can take over your mortgage payments for you, and basically pay you out on a certain, let's say, in 5 years, or 3 years, or whatever that balloon
Hmm.
payment is during
Hmm.
that time. So we can make sure that all your payments are current, get all your payments current, and then start paying on a monthly and giving you some money on the side as well too. So it's definitely on how you frame it, and it it depends on each person's situation as well too. Sub two might not work for someone that maybe has a reverse mortgage and doing way too much on the property than they should. So there's
Hmm.
a lot of situations where it might not work out, but
Right.
they're giving them options is the best way to help the seller out.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I totally recommend too is like if you have a lead and you kind of don't know what to do with it, but like think like there is a creative finance opportunity, like reach out to people. Like I know Pace's group, like they're always calling each other's leads, or you like find somebody who's like an expert and being like,
Mhm.
hey, like there is a reverse mortgage here. What are some options that we can do? Or like, hey, let's partner up. Let's JV on it, if
Mhm.
you can work something out. Like that's okay as long as we've kind of done some videos on like what that looks like. But it's also kind of as in it, and you learn from them. Like I've learned. I'm doing a subject to deal right now where I'm
Mhm.
wholesaling it to somebody, and I'm learning from the buyers. Like I think he's in Pace's group, so he's been kind of taking me under his wing and teaching
Mhm.
me like, all right, your entry costs, you want to keep it around 6%. And
Right.
of the price,
Mhm.
because you just never know what sort of things. And so now I'm like I've learned so much from him that hey, if this opportunity comes up again, I'll kind of know what to do. But like I'm okay with that. Like I'm not gonna,
Mhm.
my ego is gonna be where I'm trying to get as much money from that. Like hey, let's partner up, and work. And now it's like I've learned a lot from him where it's like hey, I can underwrite these deals
Mm.
and partner up with people and like be like hey, investor, I have this deal that's all underwritten, I have it under contract, um let's partner up. Because typically if it's a thing where it's like hey, I have a lead, I don't have it under contract, sometimes the buyers will just be like okay, well I'll just give you a finder's fee for it.
Mm. Mhm.
If you don't have it under contract, that is, if you have it under contract, you obviously have more power with it. But like if you're
Right.
just starting out, like just that's okay. Like, as long as you can trust this person, and they've done deals and you can people can vouch for them, like that's totally fine to implement. So I hope from what you guys take from this video is like you don't have to overwhelm yourself. Just start off in one place and then work your way out. Reach out to people in like who are doing those specific deals. Ask them
Mhm.
questions, or add value. Again, always come with value. Like, hey, I have this lead. This is the seller situation. How can I help? How can I help her out? Or like, let's work together on this. Like, always come it from that perspective.
Right.
And then the entire details of it, like I mean we could have gone into like the balloon payments, amortization schedule, but it's like that the like you're going to learn that stuff as you go. The main thing
Mhm.
is like how can I solve this problem, and how can I use creative finance during this recession. So just to
Exactly.
kind of sum up, this is like the going to be the best opportunity right now, because again, you're offering the seller options. The first initial call with the seller, you are gathering as much information on how you can help them. What's their pain
Right.
point? The four pillars,
Mhm.
right? Like motivation, price, timeline, and condition. And so once you have that down, you can then like see, okay, like, okay, she owns it free and clear, or she has a
Right.
mortgage on it. And then the next call, you always come in, from what I've learned, you always come in with a cash offer first. Like you want to always throw that, because you just never know. They may say yes. But they may be like, everybody keeps lowballing me, lowball, sending me low balls. And you can be like, well, as an investor cash offer, we are limited to that.
Mhm.
But you did know, I mentioned earlier, but you mentioned earlier that you own the property free and clear. There is another option where we could possibly offer you more or get close to your asking price. Is that something
Right.
you're interested in?
Mhm.
Leave it open ended for them to kind of answer, and then start the conversation again. It may take 2 or 3 tries, but you really want to build a relationship with them, because for some, they don't understand what that looks like. So you have to
Right.
like educate them in a way of like, okay, what should I expect from this? What does this look like? Well, how can I know you're going to pay me every month? And that's where it's like, hey, I think the buyer uses like, hey, if I was abducted by aliens and something happened, like, hey, the first 6 months I fixed it up. I fixed up the property. I got tenants in there. We made adjustments, and now you're taking over a property that's like in pristine condition and
Mhm.
is all ready to go. So you have to be prepared for those objections, because you just never know what may happen. So once you have that conversation with the seller, you can then understand, what you can offer them,
Mhm.
instead of just being like cash offer. Hey, here, you know what? This is based off your situation. This is what we can do.
Right.
So, it's just how you frame it. It takes practice. Work on your objections, and focus on one thing at a time. Because
Yeah.
if you're going to try to add, focus on several things, it's going to take forever. Or it's not that it's going to take forever, but it's going to take you longer to like
Mhm.
accomplish like a strategy because you're all over the place.
Right, right. And the other suggestion is like, find someone that is more experienced in that, seller financing or sub two, join a group, a community
Mhm.
that can support you and walk you through deals, or JV like you're doing
Mhm.
with another investor that has done deals like this. So they can
Mhm.
kind of, you can learn from them, and you can, kind of, they can walk you through each process of the deal. So
Right.
because learning through experience is one of the best ways to learn and retain the information. So I
Right.
think, just by doing, you're going to learn so much.
Absolutely. So, we're at the 32-minute mark. So appreciate you guys tapping in. We hope you got a lot out of it. If there's anything that you want us to go over, let us know. Like drop a comments down below. Obviously, yes, subscribe, like us on Instagram, YouTube. Follow us. I'm at the real Gladia, at Mr. Tim REI, and I think our podcast IG is get _ the bag
Hmm.
podcast. So tap in with us, or just I hope if it's something that you've always been curious about, like reach out to people. If it's not us, reach out to people who are in the game right now doing it. Pace Morby is a good place to start if you want to
Yep.
get into creative
Absolutely.
finance. So appreciate you guys tuning in again. We really hope we added value and at least kind of got you thinking in terms of how you can stand out, because the more options you give, the more opportunities you have. So thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your week, and we'll tap in with you guys later.
All right, fam. Late.
Bye.